Now let's get started with our 1 o'clock session. Paige Paquette, our speaker, attended the University of Alabama and received a BA in English and an MA in English education, after which she taught high school for 6 years before joining the faculty at Troy University at Columbus and Fort Benning. In 2009, Paige received her doctorate in Curriculum and Teaching, English Education from Auburn University, and she's been teaching online for 10 years now. Her presentation is entitled To Infinity and Beyond, the Buzz on Creating an Online Community, in which she'll focus on the use of social presence cues to create community in the online class. Paige, are you ready to begin?
Now I am. Thanks,
All
Amy.
right. No trouble.
Oops, something has happened to my slideshow. Hold on just a second. I could see it, but there it goes. Now, there I am. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me today for my presentation. I guess you might have an idea that I was at Disney World when I wrote my title. I love teaching online, and my passion is to give my students from Alabama to Afghanistan the best possible educational experience that I can. I also love to learn, and I want my students to have that same experience. I'm not sure if you all are Toy Story fans, but I am. I love all of those old toys and how they have such great adventures. They're also a really good reminder of the toys that many of us played with when we were kids. Well, in the most recent movie, Toy Story 3, we find that Andy has grown up, the toys have been passed on, and now they end up at Sunnyside Daycare. This is a totally new environment for Buzz, Woody, and the gang. They find themselves serving a much larger and different group of people, and they are definitely facing new situations. Does this sound familiar to any of you? I know that those descriptions apply to my online classes. All of these changes in the ways many of us teach don't have to be scary. They can challenge us to find new ways to make our online courses more educational for our students and more interesting for all of us. One way that we can better assure that our goals are met is by creating an online community for our classes. We can go beyond just simply offering content and information through various formats on the internet, and we can create an alive and exciting place for our online students. Just like the toys in the movie, before we can go and conquer our new environment, we need to determine and discuss exactly how did we get here? How do we get to the point of creating these online communities in our courses? So let's look at a basic history timeline of online teaching and learning. As most of you know, many of our first distance education courses were correspondence courses. Well, I have to say I am very thankful for how far we have come today. I am sure that it was not easy for a student to get excited about reading a story, writing a paper, dropping it in the mail, and just waiting and waiting and waiting. And then finally the day arrives. The paper, graded by a faceless person with no personality and maybe no life, arrives. I just don't think that students were pumped up to learn, and I doubt the instructors were really excited about teaching either. Distance researcher Michael Moore determined that things had to change. He introduced the concept of interaction. He proposed 3 types of interaction that should occur in our distance courses. As you see here, the 3 types are learner content, learner instructor, and learner learner. Up until these changes took place, the main interaction in our distance courses was probably just learner content. Maybe a little learner instructor, but I would have to guess there were very few times in correspondence courses when there was interaction between the students in the same class. Building off the ideas of Moore, Kersley and Schniederman suggested that through these forms of interactions, students could become engaged in the distance courses. The researchers proposed that if instructors created activities that would encourage interaction among students in the course, the students should become more engaged in the course. Well, if Buzz and Woody are the heroes of Toy Story, I have to say that my heroes in online education are Paloff and Pratt. I've learned so much about teaching online and creating a community in my classroom from them. As distance education moved to an online environment, practitioners Paloff and Pratt provided insight on their ideas of collaboration. They suggested that in an environment where interacting was promoted, students could engage in group activities and interactions that could help them construct knowledge. Paloff and Pratt offered several benefits to collaboration in the online classroom. Students may think more deeply. They may create shared learning goals. They may address different learning tendencies, and they can even accommodate cultural differences. As many of you know, when you write a thesis or a dissertation, there are certain concepts that practically become a part of your family. And I would have to say that about social presence. I actually got married while I was working on my dissertation, and I think my husband knew as much about social presence as he did about me the first few years we were married. Social presence is what makes participants realize that there are other real people and not just words on a screen in the class. It is pretty easy to see when participants start to recognize that other participants in the class are there, and then a sense of community can form. There are two aspects of social presence. One is the perception or recognition that there are actually other people in your course. And the other one is the actions that the participants make to project themselves into the course. So one is what you perceive, but the other is what you do. I think that it's really important that online students realize that their instructors are real people that have lives beyond teaching English. Many people aren't comfortable with revealing too much about themselves, and of course I don't tell my students everything, but I have found that sharing some of the craziest things in my life really make an impact on the students. Several years ago, when I first started teaching, I sent an email out and posted an announcement to my students that I wouldn't be available for the weekend. And I don't know why, I put in there, I'm going to the NASCAR races. And I came home to several exciting emails from one of my students who just loves NASCAR and had to tell me all about his favorite driver and everything else. And so not only that, I found out that he was a local student because he emailed me and asked me could he come by my office and actually meet me. And it was so funny when he walked in because the first thing he told me was, I realized that you were a real person when you told me you liked NASCAR. So I never really thought that that would make an impact, but obviously it helped me connect with this one student. Well, there are 8 social presence cues that really can help in creating a sense of community and drawing participants together. There are 4 cues that reveal the instructor, and those are expressing humor, maybe telling a joke, telling an experience that was funny from your own educational time, or just sharing just something that you find humorous with them. Exhibiting emotions. I'm real guilty of using a lot of smiley faces and exclamation points, but I use them purposefully when I want my students to know an emotion that I'm feeling about their work or something they said. Providing self-disclosure is just like my NASCAR story, just telling a little bit more about yourself to your students and allowing them to see a little bit beyond just the emails and the postings that they see online. And interjecting illusions of physical presence. This is like saying, well, good morning, I'm glad you could join us, or let's get started now that everybody's here. Just those things that we might typically say in a traditional brick and mortar classroom can often bring our students to feel like they're more in a community. There are also social presence cues that recognize other participants in the class. These are the ones that help participants know that someone else realizes that he or she is a real person. This is like using greetings, just saying hello, good morning. So many times I start out an email just typing the answer, and then I'm reminded that I want to use a social presence cue, and I go back and I start it out. And those emails are so much more friendly and inviting for me when I get one, but I'm sure for the students too. Addressing people by name. I know I love having somebody that I don't know necessarily knows me call me by name. It means a lot, and so I try to remember that for our students as well. Complimenting others' ideas. Just saying, you might put a note up for everyone. Did you read this posting by John? Or, you might just give the compliment to the student or to your group of students that are working together. Or you might point somebody to another student's idea, and that's complimentary as well. And then offering support or agreement for an idea. Just maybe encouraging a student, especially if he or she hasn't participated much. Or even, there are many times when they think of something that I have not even considered. So I try to tell my students, that's an amazing insight. I never even considered it. Well, we've arrived. Here we are at online communities. I hope you could see how these other concepts that have developed throughout the history of online education have brought us to this point where we're going to kind of sit for today on the point of online communities. I believe that the demonstration and recognition of social presence are two important ways of developing an online environment in which students are encouraged to state ideas, elaborate on others' thinking, and constructively question another's reasoning. When students recognize that the other students in the online course are actual people with various backgrounds but often similar interests, social and intellectual connections may form. It's through this feeling of connectedness, of realizing that there are other real people in the class and also the instructor, and that they all might have some similar interests and desired outcomes for the course. This is when a sense of community can develop among the participants. Paloff and Pratt also believe that online communities may be developed because of the students' desires to connect more. They want to have a sense of something more than just your basic correspondence. So we come to the question of the session. What's so great about online communities? Through online communities, students may interact, exchange ideas, collaborate on assignments, projects, and even other activities. It's through these communal opportunities of sharing and exchanging that students may gain new knowledge and understanding of the content. And they can also learn how this new knowledge can apply to their own lives. I really love teaching the non-traditional student. Most of my students have had many life experiences by the time they come to me. So it is so encouraging to see students learning from the content and also from the life of another student or even their own lives and the experiences that they've had. It really kind of starts a cycle that I've seen. When one student learns from another's experience, the student with the new knowledge often shares his or her own understanding based on personal experience. The great thing is that students aren't the only ones who learn from the sharing of life experiences. I do too. I love teaching the short story, The Things They Carried, to soldiers. They have a completely different perspective on this story, and I learned so much from their life experiences as they discuss the story. Our classes could also be called communities of practice. These communities are comprised of students who have common concerns, goals, passions, and interests. Similar to what I was saying earlier, Students in communities of practice bring so much to the class that they often provide many more insights than just the instructor can give. I think one of the most important things for the instructors to understand about online communities is that they are not just a social connection. Yes, these social aspects often make an online community more appealing and interesting for our students, but what we don't always realize is that the sense of connectedness and trust that often is felt in a well-designed online community actually aids in making students more comfortable in discussing content, exchanging thoughts, sharing their own experiences that relate to the material, and working with others to develop new knowledge and new ideas. One of my best examples is teaching poetry to soldiers. Now, you give a soldier a parachute, and he can pack it, wear it, and jump out of a perfectly good airplane with it. You give a soldier a poem, and he, and I do say he because it's mostly the males, is going to freak. It seems like suddenly that brave soldier has become a bumbling mess. So obviously, I don't start my class off teaching poetry and asking my soldiers to share their thoughts and feelings on poems with others. We've been in class probably about 4 weeks and already had 2 other discussion board activities before I even consider introducing poetry. Because I'll also try to group my students by similar interests or locations, by the time we get to poetry, my soldiers are usually more comfortable with showing their more interpretive side. Almost every term I get at least one evaluation that says, I never thought I would like poetry, but after I read those poems in our book, I went out and bought a book for myself. And those, as you all know, are the moments that we live for as teachers. Earlier we saw that Michael Moore suggested that there were 3 types of interaction. And when instructors create a positive and more comfortable online community, we can often see our students displaying those types of interaction. Well, Gail Davidson-Shivers has added a 4th type of interaction to Moore's list. That is the student and the learning management system. You know, I believe that the instructor's use of the learning management system to develop a sense of presence and to encourage the students to interact and engage in the class is very important and an important part of building an online community. Researcher Karen Swan has been studying this concept for many years. In studies in which she participated, she has found that there are correlations between perceived social presence and perceived community. In one study, Swan found that many students reported higher satisfaction with the course, their peers, their instructor, and higher levels of perceived learning in association with the extent to which they interacted with the other participants in the course. In another study in which Swan participated, the researchers found that the students who perceived the higher levels of social presence in their courses seemed to project themselves and participate more in the course. The researchers also found that students who recognized the instructor's efforts to establish higher levels of social presence also recognized the instructor's efforts to create a sense of community. Paloff and Pratt suggest that there is a relation between the instructor's ability to establish a presence and his or her development of a sense of community in the course. So I believe that this shows that the students' perceptions of the instructor's presence in the class is very important to their recognition of a sense of community. So let's shift for a few minutes to what might be a little more practical and the practical side of the presentation. And let's talk about what we, as instructors, can do to help create an online community in our classrooms. One of my favorite toys growing up, and 2 of my favorite characters in the movie Toy Story, are the potato heads. I used to love my Mr. Potato Head because you could make him be just about anything you wanted him to be. He could wear so many different hats and have so many different appearances. You know, when I thought about it, I found that as online instructors, we are really just instructor potato heads because we also wear many different hats and we appear to be different to each student. So here are a few of the roles that I believe we play. I think that these different roles really help establish our presence and help us to start build a community in our online classes. We're the designer, the facilitator, the supporter, the mentor. Don't you start getting tired thinking about this? Tutors, observer, evaluator, learner, coordinator, connector, scheduler, planner. I didn't even put counselor, cheerleader. We have so many different roles that we play to our students, and it's when these roles are fulfilled that I feel like the students really have a sense of community. Some other opportunities or activities that instructors could use to try to build community in their classroom are creating a website or a page that has nothing to do necessarily with academics, but just shares the instructor's interests, hobbies, pets, things like that with the students. You can do this totally outside of a learning management system. Are there ways to include it in Blackboard or another learning management system? I use Blackboard, so that's probably what I'll reference the most. Posting frequent announcements and sending out emails to the students just to let them know you're there. Providing timely messages and feedback on the discussion board. Now, I have a question about this one, and so I want to see what you guys think. Do we always have to provide feedback on the discussion board? I feel like if we create a strong sense of community in our classrooms, then we don't need to be heavily involved in the discussion board. It really made me feel better when I found that one of the qualities that Paloff and Pratt suggest makes an excellent instructor is one who will get the process started, facilitate it effectively, and then get out of the way. Because in my classes, I found that the students are doing a great job on the discussion boards most of the time without even having my involvement. Some suggest in their evaluations that I should be more involved, but many of them stress the enjoyment of the interaction that they had with other students, not the instructor. I've also found a few other suggestions that could really help to draw the students into the course. Posting a welcome letter to the students so that when they come into the course, the first thing they see is basically an invitation and a welcome, like the welcome wagon, from you to bring them into the course. Creating an introductory discussion board assignment. I always have one at the beginning of the term, seeing an all about me form. This might be something that you included online, or it might just be something for you to have handy so that when you wanted to find a way to interact or maybe group some students together, you would have that information. And create icebreakers for students to share. One neat icebreaker that I found was to take a blank car tag and to ask the students to come up with a design for a car tag that would explain them. And then they can share those, post them for the class to see, and explain why in those few letters this name or title, whatever's on the license plate, describes them. Taking students on a scavenger hunt of the class is a really great idea. This is a good way to introduce students to the class, and especially if it's a more introductory level class, you can send them on a scavenger hunt to find all the different things in the learning management system. But this is also a great idea to use somewhere in the course. If you're studying a certain time period, or you're studying a certain author, then you could send the students on a scavenger hunt to learn more. Use video and fun clips to engage the students. Suggest Skype to connect members of student groups. I just think many people have Skype already, and if they don't, it's not that hard to get. I actually even downloaded a new app for my phone that's similar to Skype where I can use video on my phone. So I think this is a great way for students to connect in groups. They can see each other, and so it's more than just typing or even chatting all in type, but they can actually see each other as they talk. Virtual classroom opportunities. I mean, there are times that you can almost have your whole classroom together. Now, this is a more challenging idea for me because our students really are around the globe, so you're thinking of a lot of different time zones, but it's a great idea. And we have so many other ways that students can create a sense of, or feel that sense of community, and that we can interact in ways outside of just content and academics. Paloff and Pratt share other suggestions for the excellent instructors to help create a sense of community in their online classrooms. They suggest that instructors should be willing to give up the power and allow their students to be responsible for their learning. And then it's our jobs to find ways to empower them to take charge of their own learning opportunities. We should show students that we're there by responding in a lot of different ways that are available to us. And I love this. This is like the duh moment. Create a method of delivery that makes all this happen. I'm really excited about the ideas that I've shared. I've been implementing some of the similar activities into my online courses already in hopes of creating more of a community among my students. And there are a few that I've found that I want to try myself. I thought I would finish up with sharing a few of the ways that I am already trying to bring community and this buzz to my online class. I try to introduce myself to the students and let them see just teeny glimpses of my own life. I told you the NASCAR story, but we have an area for instructor information, and I just don't put the basic office hours and things like that. I include a little bio that tells the students more about me, and I also include a picture so that they have more of an idea of who I am. I always provide, like I said, a getting to know you assignment. It serves as an attendance assignment too, to make sure everyone is getting into the class. And I ask some basic questions that you would expect. And then sometimes I ask, if you could meet anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why? Or I might ask, you know, and keep in mind these are all adults, who do you want to be when you grow up? And it seems to be a great way to get to know the students and to make them more comfortable with the class. I assign students to peer buddy groups, and these groups are the groups that they'll work in on the discussion board for the whole term. At my university, we have 9-week terms, and so they're in these groups the whole time. And so the first assignment that they have once they're made into their groups is to go back to the getting to know you assignment and learn more about the other people in their group. I always have the welcome note on the announcements page, and I try to make it sound make something fun or exciting for them. I usually talk about the journey we're taking through literature, or I even, from my English 1102 class, I've put up there before, this ain't your mama's composition, and explain to them what all we're going to be doing that term. So simple things like that get their attention and make them a little more comfortable, it seems. And I have found, and I guess it's because it was such a big part of my life for so many years, that I really use social presence in so many different places. I use them in my postings. I use them them in my emails, in my announcements. And it's really funny because I was giving a presentation at a conference, and I put up an example of an essay where I had put comments on the essay. And a professor raised her hand as I was talking, and she said, "Do you realize you use social presence when you respond to your students' essays?" And it had never dawned on me that I was doing that. But then it made so much sense to do it because, of course, we have audio opportunities. But if all our students are getting is feedback that's written, how cool and more real for them. I have electronic office hours, and I use Pronto through Black Fair Game. But I make sure that I'm online when I'm in my office during my designated office hours so that they know that I'm online at that time and find me. In the past, I have created peer quads for reviewing essays, like peer editing. Like I said, we only have 9 weeks, and in an English 1101 class, we have to teach 6 essays in 9 weeks. So this is one of those, I know it's a great idea, but I haven't figured out how exactly to make it work in 9 weeks. But when I did this, I broke my students up into quads, and they would spend time, I would give them a checklist, and they would spend time reviewing each other's papers. Again, this made students realize there were other students who cared and who participated, but it also gave them another set of eyes and another set of people responding besides just me. I use Wimba to enhance lectures. Wimba allows you to include audio and video if you want to just simple lectures to try to make them more interesting for the students. Again, just little details about things going on in my life throughout the term. This time last year, I had the incredible privilege of going to Israel. And so many people say, I'd love to go to Israel. So I wanted my students to have an opportunity to experience a little bit of what I was getting to experience. And so I shared little details with them along the way on the trip. And that's what makes teaching online wonderful, because you can do it from anywhere. I have really enjoyed spending time even finding videos and clips to use to enhance my courses and to enhance the students' learning. And it was really funny because I found a Bugs Bunny cartoon that told all about Mesopotamia. And I even found a Star Trek clip of Jean-Luc Picard reciting part of the story of Gilgamesh. And I was able to show those to the students in my in-class course, but also to provide all that for my students online to pique their interest and get them a little more involved. I was also able, I just recently finished teaching Hamlet, and I was able to provide a little teaser for Hamlet by showing a clip for one of my favorite movies, Renaissance Man. And, okay, this is something I didn't know. There is an episode from Gilligan's Island where the castaways perform the play Hamlet. So I was able to provide that for my students too. So I think it's these kind of additions that really help draw students into the class and even into the readings. One of the plays that we read from our backpack literature book is Trifles. And I recently had a student attend an art exhibit and find a picture titled Trifles. So she stood and she analyzed the picture for a while. And then she found it was an abstract picture from the play. So she sent me a picture of the picture. She was so excited to find it. And so then I asked her, could I share it with the whole class? And of course she said yes. And so there was a little bit of a pat on the back there in addition to her excitement in finding it. One of my favorite discussion board postings is for poetry. I use a poem by Hunt Hawkins called Mourning the Dying American Female Names. If you aren't familiar with the poem, Hawkins discusses the names of women in the past like Mildred, Gladys, Gertrude, Myrtle, and he includes many more. And he talks about how time has changed with the names and how the stronger names, you could expect stronger women to be attached to them, and how names used to be powerful and how many of them today are basically, well, he doesn't say it, but basically more cute. And the poem is really a great one, and you should read it if you haven't read it before. And so I really enjoy seeing my students' responses to this poem. It's, you know, some people say, oh, my wife and I are about to have a baby, and I haven't really thought about that much about how important a name is. Or, you know, my grandmother's name was Marjorie, and yeah, that really does describe her as strong and powerful. And so it does get a little fun when you have a female soldier who might be named Brittany or Ashley, and it's interesting to read what they post about it too. But it's a great way to get the students more comfortable with poetry and for them to see how poetry can evoke feelings and thoughts and sometimes emotions. I would say that the discussion board has probably turned out to be one of my most successful tools for creating an online community. It's not always easy, and it takes a little coaxing and maybe even a little training, but my evaluations have had many more students praising the opportunity than putting it down. I assign discussion board buddy groups, like I said, in which students will participate on the discussion board the whole term. I usually try to group my students based on similar interests, careers, genders, or locations. Sometimes I just group them randomly, but I've found that those who have similarities seem to interact a lot more. Okay, that's not tested, just observed. I also like to try to find unique thoughts and interesting concepts that the students share on the discussion board, and with their permission, I like to share them with the whole class, because I think that's another way to really just put it out there that there are other people in the class. And I've found that scheduling the students' interactions into their academic week for the discussion board really helps to keep that interaction going. Here you will see my student schedule for a course that has a discussion component, but in other words, the students start to visit and post more than they're assigned to. I think the most important thing that we as instructors should all realize is the same thing that the toys realized at the end of Toy Story 3 movie. No matter what, we're all in this together. So I'd love to take a few minutes for you all to share other ideas of ways that you create a sense of community in your class, and also ask any questions you might have.
Okay, Paige, can you hear me okay? Hey, this is Amy.
Yes, I can.
All right. The questions are sort of falling out into some general categories. So this first group is really about getting students to engage with each other, kind of drawing people forward into different discussions. So we have a question from Judy Braun at Salt Lake Community College. Her question has to do with, even though she's creating the community and students are introducing themselves and getting involved in the discussion, they're not really engaging with her in some of the ways, and I think a lot of us who teach online find this. They seem reluctant to come forward with questions or concerns, or to get in touch with you about those things. Do you find that to be true as well? And if so, do you have any techniques for working with that?
I do. Just recently, I emailed a student to tell her that there were some things that weren't cited, and her response to me was, "Oh, well, I didn't really understand the assignment." And I was thinking, you know, that's why I'm here. And so I think every time that I have a situation like that come up, I try to make a note of it. And so that's the nice thing, especially for us where there's only 9-week terms. We get lots of do-overs. And so I try to get more and more specific for them. But you really still are going to run into kind of situations. There have been times we have a great program at Troy where we can have high school students who take our classes. And so when some students are recognized as maybe high school students or brand new students to our university, then I personally contact each one of them and say, you know, I'm here. I'm going to assume you're doing well unless I hear from you. So I guess it depends on how many students you have, but that might be one way, is just to send a personal email. If you can get to them by phone, just some way to make a personal connection, and in that connection say, hey, if you have, no question is too simple. If you have a question or concern or something you want to share, I'm here. Feel free to contact me.
Well, this is kind of another kind of a related question. This is coming from Ernest Brenson at Edison State College in Fort Myers, and he's wondering how much you emphasize netiquette, and along kind of the other part to his question is how heavily do you typically moderate your student interactions? There's a related question from Vanessa Michelle in West Palm Beach. She's saying, you know, she's familiar with the research on kind of staying out of discussion boards and finds that that approach works well, but what do you do about discussions that really aren't going deep enough? How do you get them to you know, develop some depth without disrupting the community feel?
Right. Well, I do provide with every discussion board assignment, I provide 4 or 5 guidelines for you know, posting, you know, respecting others, and then basically I just tell them, don't write anything that your grandmother wouldn't approve of. Keep it G-rated, but and so I really have not run into a lot of trouble. Maybe when I first started, I had a few instances where students, rather than just saying, oh, that's a unique perspective, I've never thought of that before, they might say, you know, I didn't really get that, I don't, you know, maybe you didn't, did you really mean that, kind of thing. And so just throughout the time, I feel like I address that when it happens, maybe even privately. And so that kind of has seemed to help, where I just really don't run into any, I say that, and now I'm going to look at my next discussion board, and it's going to be crazy, but I don't run into the problem
knock on wood, right?
with them being disrespectful to each other. And I find, last night I was just reading some postings, and they're building each other up. They're doing all the things that I want them to do. It's amazing. You know, this was a great idea. I've never thought about it. And it's really neat when you put, I keep going back to my military students, but they're in a different almost culture from civilians. And, you know, it's really neat when you can put them together, because people from both sides learn so much from the other side. And so I really, you know, but I do provide guidelines, and if it's something that, you know, like calling somebody out or something, I might do that privately and then remove it from the discussion board. But most of the time, you know, I really just found a sense of them building each other up and encouraging each other. And in that, I found that a lot of the postings go deeper without me having to do anything or say anything. And I know there are times that we have to step in and say, you know, if nobody else is doing it, well, what do you think about this? But I can do that once, and then usually with that group, I don't have to do it again. If I kind of step in maybe the first, that's where I really try to look, is the first discussion board postings, and I model those things, then I start seeing them saying, well, I never considered that. What do you think about this? And so I think a lot of it, and that's why I called it, I hate to call it training, but I think a lot of it is modeling, and that the students, when they pick up on it being successful, then they'll start to model those things too.
Okay.
Did that answer all that question?
I think it did. Did you, there's a couple questions here about resistance among students when you try to encourage or implement learner-to-learner interactions, or to make learner-to-learner interactions more primary. Do you feel that resistance? Do you have
I do here, especially, and you can usually look at somebody's bio and then understand why they're more that way, you know. And I do have some students who don't want to do the group work, and he or she just wants to work over in the corner alone. And so that's why I have found that I provide my students with just a simple calendar, that like the ones that you get in a Word document. And so they have a calendar with all their assignments on it for the term. And so that's where I was saying I go ahead and I schedule these interactions. And so most of them will do it just because they're getting credit for it. But then they get in and they start learning things and they start seeing things, and I've found that the number of students who show resistance is less, and sometimes they just don't show up because they don't want to, and they're just like, you know, we'll show you, and they don't think the points make that big of a difference in their grades. But there are always going to be those students who say, I didn't sign up for an online class to have to talk to other people, you know.
Exactly. So do you grade that? There's a couple questions here about your grading of discussion board postings, and, you know, of course there's a lot of, like with interaction within the discussion board, there's a lot of different opinions on that, on, you know, whether you should grade the discussion posts and how that affects interaction. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I basically just give them a grade for participating. And I don't really, I'm still learning about all this, but it's kind of like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so I just keep trying to figure out a way to not mess it up. But I really just grade them for participating. I give a minimum amount I tell them they have to have at least 300 words to get credit for the posting, because it's just like if you don't tell a student they have to have at least 3 pages, you know, they'll try to get it in a page and a half, and it's not going to be quality work. But typically I've found when they meet that criteria and the other few things that I, you know, tell them about sharing their thoughts and their personal experiences and stuff, you know, they give great stuff, and I'm not going to tell them that something is right or wrong. It's because as long as they're supporting it, it's their thoughts, you know, and their feelings. So I just grade them mostly on the initial posting, and I haven't really even figured out how to grade them as much on the other postings that they're scheduled to do. But they haven't really complained about that. And most of them do it whether they see an individual grade for each one of them or not. So the time is probably coming when I have a student who says, did I get credit for all 3 times? But most of the time they start just seeing, you know, that it's a cool thing to use, and they just keep going back to it, even though they're not necessarily graded on all of it. So.
Well, gosh, we're out of time. There are a couple more questions, but I'm going to forward those to you offline, Paige, and then if you want to get back to the questioners about that, that would be great. And these sessions are going to be archived, and everyone who's attending the session right now will get an email when the archive is available, so you can go back and listen to it. there were a couple questions
Okay.
about poems, and the Hunt Hawkins poem that you mentioned, that's the Morning of the Dying Female Names. That's the name of that one, right?
American names, yeah.
American names.
Yeah.
Okay, well, gosh, Paige, it was great to talk with you. Great to hear from you. Thanks again.
Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks, Paige.
Thank you.
Okay, our next session is going to begin in 10 minutes, so, so stay tuned. Thank you.